As part of his incredible collection of vintage gear, Chris Hewitt has reassembled the groundbreaking immersive PA systems Pink Floyd used at Pompeii and on their Dark Side of the Moon tour. Chris has spent years tracking down the original loudspeakers, power amps and microphones, and he's even recreated the Floyd's unique quadraphonic console, custom built by Alan and Heath. We paid Chris a visit to find out more.
I'm Chris Hewitt. I run CH Vintage Audio, which is one of the world's largest sort of private museum collections of vintage live and recording gear. The full system is 14 of these bass bins, so 7 of these bass bins each side, and about 28 sets of the silver horns and a couple of sets of bullets. So I think we've got 8 bins, 7 horns and 2 sets of bullets and a massive pile of phase linears. So we can do, you know, a slightly scaled down version of the full Dark Side of the Moon rig. This Alan and Heath desk is based upon the same 7 controls that are in the Alan and Heath Minimix, because at the point when this desk was built in '71, the only real desk that, apart from the Who desk and this desk, Alan and Heath's proprietary business was building the 6-channel Minimix. And Andy Bereza, who designed this desk, started off as AB Audio, and I've actually got a circuit diagram of his, I think, for an idea for a mixer from 1959, when he first started thinking about designing mixers. The Minimix was a bet where someone bet him that he couldn't make a 6-channel mixer in a cigar box. And he won the bet because he did make the Minimix, and it became a very popular mixer. So when Pink Floyd started to mix stuff in quad, mainly the quad was used for routing effects. Richard Wright did still have a little unit that he could pan his keyboards around with, the famous azimuth coordinator. But there was four quad pan pots on the desk. There was a Tascam 4-track reel-to-reel, or a Teac it would have been back then, and that was fed up on 4 sliders into the quad section. That brought in various effects tapes, which could then be panned around the mid left and right and the front and back speakers. So things like helicopter sounds and stuff like that and keyboard sounds would be panned around the room. And then the basic main band sound was just left and right of stage on these stacks. When this desk was out on the road with Alan Parsons, Alan Parsons said that all the roadies used to delight in turning all the controls back to 0, either at the start of the next gig day or at the end of the previous gig day. And he got so fed up of trying to get the drum sound at every gig that he actually sub-mixed the drums on a 6-channel Minimix and then put that into this desk. And he took the Minimix home in his briefcase or to the hotel each night with him, so that no one could fiddle with his drum mix. The only effect that Pink Floyd used on these early shows, Dark Side of the Moon, apart from the backing tape effect, the only effect that was routed into the desk was a Binson Echorec. And there was no graphic equalizers, there was no, there was nothing. You've got the mixing desk, you've got the Binson Echorec, and that was it. That was your lot. This desk was either mixed by Peter Watts, a guy called Chris Michie, spelled M-I-C-H-I-E, or Alan Parsons. They did the mix, but there was another guy called Mick the Pole Klaczynski, who was supposedly one of the best van loaders in the business. And Mick the Pole, his job was to operate the 4 quad sliders with the Teac multi-track effects off the tape coming in, and those sliders were all glued together in a line. So all you had to do was like push the group of 4 up in one go, and that would bring the tape in. So that was his job. There was no monitoring at Pompeii, and the original Pink Floyd sound people didn't really like monitors. I think they were brought in for Dark Side of the Moon backing singers, and the description was monitors spread like a virus across the stage. Because of course at that point you were just mixing out front. There was no such thing as a monitor desk. And then I think towards the end of Dark Side of the Moon and into Wish You Were Here, as more backing singers came in, the backing singers asked for wedge monitors, and then the description was, that David Gilmour saw the backing singers had monitors, and so he wanted a couple. Then Rick Wright wanted some, then Nick Mason, then Roger wanted them, and they spread like a virus. But by that point, I assume there must have also been an onstage monitor desk. So the Sennheiser vocal mics come into the story. They were very prevalent at Pompeii. Apparently a Sennheiser rep turned up at Watkins Electric Music, WEM, one day whilst Peter Watts, the Pink Floyd road manager, was round at WEM. He was always there getting amps repaired and picking stuff up. And they introduced him to the Sennheiser MD 409. And Watkins used those for his festival work, and the Floyd introduced them, and Roger loved them. So Roger said, we need to get more of these and we'll use them on vocals, instruments and everything. The phase linear amplifier, which you'll see in the racks here that are running the Kelsey Martin bins, there was a 400 version and a 700 version, and they were American amplifiers, which were brought in by the Floyd, but their original purpose was for late 60s, early 70s, large home hi-fi systems, because the Americans obviously always did everything big. They were the first people to have the home cinema room, and they had home hi-fi, home theatre rooms, and the phase linear was basically designed to be the ultimate home hi-fi amp. The only problem being was that it was a massive transformer to drive the transistors, but a very flimsy aluminium chassis. So whenever one sort of had a rack of phase linears and sort of dropped them out the back of the truck on the tail lift, the transformers would tend to sort of distort the chassis, which would then cause the circuit boards to touch the outer case and everything would go DC. So you had to have a spare amount of phase linears, and in the end, Pink Floyd actually took the standard phase linears, 700s, and converted them into the Pink Floyd Mark III power amp, of which we've got one here. And that was an upgraded version with LEDs on the front and sliders and more circuit protection. Charlie Watkins, probably about, I think, 69, had an idea for throwing high frequency on a PA over a long distance, and he'd apparently driven past a Plessey factory in Weybridge, I think it was, where they'd got a couple of parabolic dishes, sort of radio dishes, pointing at each other on the grass outside the offices as a sort of, a sales gimmick. And he was thinking about these parabolic dishes, and also he'd heard about the concrete listening, the parabolic listening devices that were on the Kent coast that were pointed at the sky, that bounced the sound of enemy aircraft could be heard. If you had a listener in the dish, he could hear aircraft at 8 miles away. So same sort of process of, moving sound by parabolic dishes. So Charlie came up with this idea of taking a 20 watt Celestion 10-inch speaker and mounting it on a sort of four-legged frame with like a curved ball which the speaker was in, almost like the front nose cone of an aeroplane, and that pointed outwards, but the speaker basically bounced onto the dish. And at the Isle of Wight, they reckon they could hear the high frequencies about 4.5 miles away. I think they're probably about 5 foot diameter, and they just have a 20 watt speaker, and they just run off a small WEM slave, and you just a little passive crossover device, just a capacitor, and you know, it'll throw top end for just a 10-inch speaker throwing top end for about 4.5 miles. So, but I think they were used at the Bath Festival, the Isle of Wight. They weren't used at Pompeii, but they were used at all the other gigs around the same time as Pompeii. An interesting invention of Charlie Watkins, but I think there were only probably ever 2 sets made, and one got destroyed and I've got the other set. Eventually we will do a gig once the desk has been completely populated with working channels by Alan and Heath, because they've come on board. I developed the thing initially as just a prototype with a couple of working channels and a lot of dummy channels. And then Alan and Heath said, well, let's get the whole thing working as a proper mixing desk. Now you've built the 2 prototypes to Andy Bereza's circuit, why don't we mass manufacture the channels for the desk and populate it? So that's going to be, so there will be a point where we will gig with the desk with a Pink Floyd band of some sort somewhere as a demo for ourselves and Alan and Heath, and the fact that what we can do. We know that the red push buttons on each channel are routing to quad, and we know that the green push buttons on each channel are routing to effects. So it's a standard Alan and Heath module, and then basically you've got 2 groups of 14, and then you've got masters for each group of 14. We've also got the 4 quad joysticks for panning the sound around the room. Left and right are the main PA, and the 4 quad stacks of speakers and amps are around the room, so it's 28 into 6. And then we've also got a 3.5mm patch bay. It's 3.5 stereo, and you've got send and return on the tip and the ring. Last year, we took 4 of the bass bins, about 5 sets of the horns and the bullet boxes and some of the phase linears, and displayed it in the foyer of the Australian Pink Floyd tour. The sound of this system has definitely got more dynamic range than a modern system in terms of, I find when I go to listen to systems at modern gigs, it's a very compressed sound. You know, in the same way, it's almost like the difference between listening to a vinyl and listening to, you know, a track on your iPhone or on your computer. The full range of this system, remembering of course that there is this mid-range still hadn't been developed. Dave Martin's Philly Shave was still to come out, and that revolutionised live sound even more, but this is 3 or 4 years before that. But it's still a fantastic range of sounds, and you know, we play this at a lot of places where there are modern sound systems at trade shows and things, and people always come over and say, your system sounds better.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and share it, and subscribe and click the bell icon so you know when we upload new content. Also find us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook.